Good afternoon. This is Elizabeth West. I'm the editorial director of the BTN Group, and you are watching Business Travel Show Europe on BTN TV. I am joined today by Catherine Logan of the Global Business Travel Association, and thank you so much for joining us today, Catherine.
Oh, well, thank you for having me, Beth. I really appreciate it.
Absolutely. Why don't you tell me a little bit about your role at GBTA and how long you've been doing that?
Okay, I have been with GBTA, believe it or not, for 10 years.
Yeah.
It's my anniversary this year.
Nice, congrats.
Oh, well, thank you. So I'm responsible for running our operations in the EMEA region. And what that really means is managing our strategic relationships, organising our conferences and events, running our membership and running education. So it's a really interesting and varied role. And then another exciting thing that we've been doing for about the last 7 years is advocacy in Brussels and now in Westminster.
Yeah, very good. And I think the advocacy is one of the things that has been such an important element of GBTA and your particular role, obviously, over the course of the pandemic. But now, as we emerge from the pandemic, again, we're finding some pretty rocky roads in front of us. What is your advocacy mission right now? What are your messages to Westminster and Brussels?
Okay, well, so I suppose we would have three main strands. One is about sort of the business continuity. The travel industry is absolutely pivotal to global growth and that economic growth that all industry needs and all countries need. And so we're working hard in both in Brussels and Westminster to really try and make sure that there are no more hiccups on that road to recovery. So what we've found is 43% of our members said that concern around government restrictions is their number one concern in the return to travel. And so we have to really try and work with governments to make sure that they understand that travel restrictions, they didn't really actually have an impact in terms of the spread of COVID during the pandemic. And it's really important to try and open that up in a consistent and a reasonable way. So we're working both in Brussels and Westminster on that. The second thing is, as Mike Berners-Lee at our conference said, sustainability is coming down the road like a freight train. And I think that for our industry in particular, it's a really, really top priority. So we're at the table trying to make sure that our industry is represented properly in terms of those discussions around sustainability. We all know it's important. The industry is working very, very hard to make sure it's as sustainable as possible. And so we're making sure that the legislation doesn't punish the industry, but helps it. And then the third thing is just that, in terms of how we represented our industry through COVID, we collaborated right across the piece with the whole of the sort of travel ecosystem. So, but we are trying to make sure that administrators understand the difference between business travel and leisure travel. Business travel isn't discretionary. It isn't about people on luxury trips. It is about people representing organisations going out, winning business, driving job growth, driving economic growth. And so we're really working hard to make sure that people understand the difference.
And I think one of the changes that has really come through in Europe over the past year is the introduction of the new ISO, and I'm going to get the number wrong, 31030. That one is that new standard. How is that? It's about risk management, but it also is about risk management all the way down into traveler well-being and mental health. And how is that? And it's almost like advocating for travelers and advocating for companies to up their game when it comes to duty of care, travel risk management. And I know you've done, and the GBTA has done, quite a lot of work on this, and there's been some programming around it. How is this new standard changing the way travel managers need to think about their jobs?
Well, I think to be fair, travel managers or any travel manager I've ever spoken to has said risk management and duty of care is actually the most important thing that they do. Mm-hmm. And going back to years ago, whenever I did basic management training and we talked about health and safety, mm-hmm. Health and safety a lot of the time is about best endeavours. But if you think about this is the most important part of the role, and you're talking about best endeavours, there was never something that said what best practice was never something that gave you the roadmap or the blueprint for what that should be. And that's what this standard does. It lays out, said, this is the standard, this is the level that you should reach, this is what your best practice is. And so at last there's the guidance as to what it should be. And so if an organization deviates from that, there's something, we don't know what will happen in terms of in the future in terms of court case or something, but at least there's now something that says this is what best practice is. And we, as you say, or as you mentioned, we have developed an education program with GSA, and we've rolled it out since September last year. And it has been really, really well received. And it's interesting that there are a lot of people who aren't typically in the travel industry who have taken that course, so, and it's just showing how travel management as a practice actually touches on so many other parts of organisations. And so it's been really well received. And I know that work is underway now to develop an accreditation that goes off that standard.
Got it. And I think what's interesting, and I think one of the things that I wanted to just sort of draw to the top is that, risk management, traveler well-being, it is more than about COVID. And we all sort of got into this COVID mindset now that we have restrictions lifting. And of course, it's still important to care about the health of your travelers, and it always will be important to care about that. But there are so many other sort of risk vectors out there that need to be at least considered and planned for in a risk management strategy. So are you working with risk management companies? Are you working with partners to do this programming? How is the GBTA putting that together?
Well, if we think about our program for Brussels, for instance, there is a lot of we get so many submissions each year, and you can see the topics that are key. You can see that that are of interest to people. Wellness is absolutely one of them, and I think people are they're looking at that, from a perspective of obviously keeping their travellers safe, making sure their travellers are healthy. There's and their employees as a whole are healthy, and I think that's something that's really important, not only from a perspective of a duty of care, but also in employee retention.
Yeah.
It's absolutely key. And we're in a situation in the UK where there are more vacancies than there are people who are looking for jobs. So employees or employers need to take care of their employees, and this is like a key part of it.
And I mean, you get into the area of sort of travel management and how it's, in certain cases, I think we talked about how it's becoming more of a strategic practice within the organization, or it can become more than a strategic practice. And a number of our, close buyer friends of BTN have really talked about that with us, and how they've felt like they really have a seat at the table. They're bringing data to people, and people are really listening to what they have to say. But this idea that HR really cares about what's happening in travel now. The C-suite really cares about what's happening in travel now. IT really cares about what's happening in travel now. Facilities really cares about what's happening in travel now. It is just another outgrowth of that, the wellness piece, and how travel management and HR retention they are coming closer together. Do you see that as a trend going forward in our industry, that those two functions within the organization will become closer?
I think it's funny, at the last business travel show in September, I was talking in a similar interview to this, and I was saying that actually this is a point of change for the travel manager. Over the last 2 years, is exactly as you said, they had access to far more senior executives. They were really helping to drive strategy and inform their executive their board as to what they should be doing around travel, around employees, about returning to work, about how all of that looked. And it was an opportunity where they had a seat at the table. And as you say, there are a lot of buyers who have used that as an opportunity, and their roles have expanded. They clearly have a stronger voice. And so, I think number one, travel managers have that opportunity to become a lot more strategic and have a more influential role. In terms of what you're saying around HR and wellness and the importance of travel around that, I just go back to what I said before. Bottom line is, with the way in which work is changing, people don't have the same sort of opportunity to build, say, to build the same level of, or say, sense of belonging with their organisation and that company culture and just really buying into it. So the way in which you treat employees in all aspects is really important, and it will help to develop employee loyalty. It'll help to encourage employees to buy into that company culture. And so travel's an absolutely fundamental part of it, because you know yourself, if you're the person who's told that you have to get up and get the earliest train possible, you've got to take the cheapest flight possible, you're staying at a hotel that's miles away from where you want to be, and it's not the type of place you want to be, how do you feel about that trip? It's basic common sense, and I think people are realizing that there's so much more that's that you can add value to the employee's experience.
Well, Catherine, I want to thank you so much for being a part of this interview today. I know it's getting near the end of the Business Travel Show this afternoon, so your time is especially valuable right now. Thank you for joining us today on BTN TV, and enjoy the rest of the Business Travel Show.